Hey guys, how's it going? I'm Sims the Comic. We have stories and so much more. Dealing with Dragons by Patricia C. Reed. Chapter 4, in which Kazul has a dinner party and Cimarine makes dessert. Cimarine watched Thranduil go with feelings of great relief. Now she had at least a month to find a permanent way of discouraging the knights, for she was quite certain that Thranduil would spread the news of her injury. She decided to put up her sign anyway, just in case. And after a little looking, she found a scrubby tree beside the path and hung the sign on it. On her way back to Kazul's cave, she noticed that the two pieces of the ledge were still invisible, and she was very careful about crossing them. She looked down once, out of curiosity, and was immediately sorry. She was not comfortable with the sight of her own feet firmly planted on nothing at all, with the sharp, spiky tops of spruce trees in full view, some 50 feet below. Kazul arrived only a few minutes after Cimarine herself. Cimarine was looking for some thread to mend her skirts, which had gotten torn and stained while she was climbing along the ledge, when she heard the unmistakable sounds of a dragon sliding into the main cave. "Cimarine?" Kazul's voice called. "Coming!" Cimarine called back, abandoning her search. She picked up her lamp and hurried out to greet Kazul. "I'm glad you're still here," Kazul said mildly as Cimarine came into the large cave. "Morans was quite sure you'd run off with a knight or a wizard. I couldn't make out for certain which." "Is Morzan the yellow green dragon who wanted to eat me?" Cimarine said. "Because if he is, he's just trying to make trouble." "I'm well aware of that," Kazul said with a sigh that sent a burnt bread smell halfway across the cave. "But things would be easier for me if you didn't provide him with any material to make trouble with." "Exactly what happened?" "Well, Morwen came to visit this afternoon," Cimarine began. "We were talking about all the interruptions I've been having, and she suggested putting up a sign." She explained why she had gone to put up the sign herself and told Kazul in detail about her meetings with the wizard, the dragon, and the prince. "So Morwen was here," Kazul said. She sat back and the scales on her tail rattled comfortably against the floor. "That simplifies matters. Did you bring the sign back with you?" "No, I found a tree and hung it by the path," Cimarine said, wondering what this was all about. "In case Thranduil doesn't tell everyone about my ankle after all." "Better still," Kazul said, and smiled fiercely, showing all her teeth. Morans is going to regret meddling." "Meddling in what?" "My business." I'd like a little more of an explanation than that, if you don't mind giving one," Cimarine said, with a touch of exasperation. Kazul looked startled, then thoughtful. Then she nodded. "I keep forgetting you're not as empty-headed as most princesses," she said. "Sit down and make yourself comfortable. This may take a while." Cimarine found a rock and sat on it. Kazul settled into a more restful position, folded her wings neatly along her back, and began. "It has to do with status. Dragons aren't required to have princesses, you see. Most of us don't. There are never enough to go around, and some of us prefer not to have to deal with the annoyances that come with them." "Knights," Cimarine guessed. "Among other things," Kazul said, nodding. "So having a princess in residence has become a minor mark of high status among dragons." "A minor mark?" Kazul smiled. "I'm afraid so. It's the equivalent of, serving expensive imported fruit at dinner. It's a nice way of showing everyone how rich you are, but you could make just a bit as big an impression by having some of those fancy pastries with the smooth glazed icing and spun sugar roses." "I see." Cimarine did see, though she found herself wishing Kazul had found something else to compare it to. Talk of dinner reminded her too much of Morzan's repeated desire to eat her. Moranz is young and not very bright, I'm afraid, Kazul said, almost as if she had read Simrine's mind. He seems to have the mistaken impression that if a princess behaves badly, it reflects on the dragon who captured her. Possibly it comes from his inability to keep any of his own princesses for more than a week. Some of the lesser dragons were very snide about it when he lost his third one in a row. I believe she sneaked out while he was napping. I don't see how he can blame his princesses, Simrine objected. I mean, if most princesses are unwilling, it must be fairly usual for them to try to get away. Of course, but Morzan doesn't see it that way. He's been trying to catch someone else's princess in a similar foolishness for years. And he's quite sure he's finally done so. He's undoubtedly spreading the story of your escape far and wide at this very minute. Oh dear, Simrine said. Kazula smiled again and her teeth glittered silver in the lamplight. He'll look extremely foolish when it becomes obvious that you're still here. Which is one reason I've asked a few of my friends to dinner tonight. You've what? Simrine said. All her worries about Moranz were instantly replaced by worries about fixing dinner on short notice for an unknown number of dragons. How many? What time will they be here? And where are we going to put them all? 6, around 8:30, in Banquet Cave. And you won't be doing anything but dessert. I've already arranged for the rest of the meal. Arranged? With whom? Balamor the giantess. She's loaned me the cauldron of plenty that she uses when her 12-headed son-in-law drops in for dinner unannounced. It'll handle most things, but all it can produce in the way of dessert is burnt mint custard and sour cream and onion ice cream. Ugh, said Simrine. I see your problem. Exactly. Can you manage? Not if you want Cherry's Jubilee, Simrine said, frowning. I haven't got a pot large enough to make 7 dragons worth of Cherry's Jubilee. With chocolate mousse stew, I can make 2 or 3 batches, and there should be time for all of them to chill if you're not starting until 8:30. Chocolate mousse will be fine, Kazula assured her. Come along and I'll show you where to bring it. Simrine picked up a lamp and followed Kazul into the public tunnels that surrounded Kazul's private caves. She was a little surprised, but when she saw the eyes of the banquet cave, she understood. It was enormous. 50 or 60 dragons, perhaps even 100 of them, would fit into it quite comfortably. Obviously, it had to be a public room. There simply wasn't enough space under the mountains of morning for every dragon to have a cave this size. Kazul made sure Simrine could find her way to the banquet cave without help, and then left her in the kitchen to melt slabs of chocolate and whip gallons of cream for the mousse. By the time she finished, she was hot and tired, and all she really wanted to do was take a nap. But Kazul was expecting her to serve the mousse, and Simrine wasn't about to appear before all those dragons in her old clothes and sweaty straggles of hair sticking to her neck, and a smear of chocolate across her nose. So instead of napping, she pumped a cauldron of water, heated it on the fire, and took a bath. Once she was clean, she felt much better. She checked to make sure the mousse was setting properly, then went into her own rooms to decide what she should wear. Unfortunately, she was afraid she didn't have much choice. The wardrobe in her bedroom was full of neat, serviceable dresses suitable for cooking in or rummaging through treasure, but the only dressy clothes she had were the ones she had arrived in. She got them out of the back of the wardrobe and found, to her dismay, that the hem of the gown was badly stained with mud from her long walk. There was no time to clean it. She would have to wear one of the everyday dresses. With a sigh, Simrine turned back to the wardrobe and opened it once more to look for the nicest of the ordinary clothes. She gasped in surprise. The hangers were now full of the most beautiful gowns she had ever seen. Some were silk and some were velvet. Some were heavy brocade and some were layers of feather-like gauze. Some were embroidered with gold or silver, and some were sewn with jewels. Well, of course, Simrine said aloud after a stunned moment. Why would a dragon have an ordinary wardrobe? Of course it's magic. What's in it depends on what I'm looking for. One of the doors waggled slightly, and the hinges squeaked in smug agreement. Simrine blinked at it, then shook herself and began looking through the gowns. She chose one of red velvet, heavily embroidered with gold, and found matching slippers in the bottom of the obliging wardrobe. She set her black hair hanging in loose waves nearly to her feet, and even dug her crown out of the back of the drawer where she'd stuffed it on her first night. She finished getting ready a few minutes early, feeling very cheerful. She went to the kitchen to fetch the mousse. It took Simrine 4 trips to get the mousse down to the serving area just off the banquet cave. A dragon-sized serving was a little over a bucketful, and she could barely manage to carry 2 at a time. When everything was ready, she stood in the serving area and waited nervously for Kazul to ring for dessert. She could hear the muffled booming of the dragon's voices through the heavy oak door, but she could not make out what any of them were saying. The bell rang at last, summoning Simrine to serve dessert. She carried the mousse into the banquet cavern, 2 servings at a time, and set it in front of Kazul and her guests. The dragons were crouched around a shoulder-high slab of white stone. Simrine had to be very careful about lifting the mousse up onto it. Fortunately, she didn't have to wonder which dragon to serve first. She could tell which dragons were most important from their places at the table. She made a silent apology to her protocol teacher, who had insisted that she learn about seating arrangements. Protocol had been one of the princess lessons Simrine had hated the most. As she set the last serving in front of Kazul, one of the other dragons said in a disgruntled and vaguely familiar voice, "I see the rumors were wrong again, Kazul. Or did you have to go after her and haul her back the way the rest of us do?" Simrine turned angrily, but before she could say anything, a large gray-green dragon on the other side of the stone slab said, "Nonsense, Warog. Girls got more sense than that. Shouldn't listen to gossip. Next thing you know, you'll be chasing after that imaginary wizard Garam's been on about." Simrine recognized the speaker at once. It was Roxim, the elderly dragon she had given 4 of her handkerchiefs to. "I suppose it was that idiot morons again trying to cause trouble," the purple-green dragon said, with bored distaste. "Someone should do something about him." "Kazul still hasn't answered my question," Warog said, and his tail lashed once like the tail of an angry cat. "And I'd like her to do so if the rest of you will stop sidetracking the conversation." "Here now," Roxam said indignantly. "That's a bit strong, Warog. Too strong, if you ask me." "I didn't," Warog said. "I asked Kazul, and I'm still waiting." "I'm very pleased with my princess," Kazul said mildly. "And no, I didn't have to haul her back, as you would realize if you'd given the matter a little thought. Or does your princess normally leave 7 servings of chocolate mousse in the kitchen when she runs away?" "Hear, hear," Roxam said. Simrine noted with interest that Warog's scales turned an even brighter shade of green than normal, and that he was starting to smell faintly of brimstone. "One of these days you'll go too far, Kazul," he said. "You started it," Kazul pointed out. She turned to the gray dragon. "What's this about Garam and wizard, Roxam?" "You haven't heard?" Roxam said, sounding surprised. "Garam's been raving about it for weeks. Somebody snuck into her cave and stole a book from her library. No traces, but for some reason she's positive it was a wizard." "Achoo!" Roxam sneezed, emitting a ball of flame that just missed hitting his bowl of mousse. "Gives me an allergy attack just thinking about it." "If it wasn't a wizard, who was it?" the dragon at the far end of the table asked. "Could have been anybody. An elf, a dwarf, even a human," Roxam responded. "No reason to think it was a wizard just because Garam didn't catch him in the act, not with the amount of time she spends away from home." "Which book did she lose?" said the thin, brownish brownish-green dragon next to Kazul. What does it matter? The purple-green dragon muttered. Some history or other. And that's another thing. What would a wizard want with a history book? No, Garam's making a lot of fuss over a common thief. That's what I say. It could have been a wizard, said the dragon at the far end. Who knows what they want, why they want the things they want? Ridiculous, Roxham replied with vigor. A wizard wouldn't dare come through this part of the mountains. They'd know what we do to them, by George. Beg pardon, he added to the silver-green dragon next to him, who appeared to have been rather shocked by his language. I'm afraid you're wrong there, Kazul said. Simmering met one today, less than 2-minute flight from my cave. What? Roxham said. You're sure? That's done it. The purple-green dragon rolled his head in an irritated gesture so that his scales made a scratching noise as they rubbed together. You'll never get him to quit talking about it now. Quite sure, Simmering assured Roxham after glancing at Kazul to make sure she was expected to answer Roxham's question for herself. He made 2 bits of the ledge I was standing on turn invisible, so I think it wasn't safe to keep going. Certainly sounds like a wizard to me, the dragon at the far end commented. What did he look like? Asked the silver-green dragon. Simmering described the wizard as well as she could, then added, he said his name was Zeminar. Zeminar? That's ridiculous, Warg snorted. Zeminar was elected head of the Society of Wizards last year. He wouldn't waste his time playing games with somebody's princess. Not unless he had a great deal to gain by it, the thin dragon said in a thoughtful tone. She turned her head and looked speculatively at Simmering. Such as? He waited a moment, but no one answered. No, I can't believe it was Zeminar. The girls made a mistake, that's all. Perhaps it wasn't him, Simmering said, holding on to her temper as hard as she could. I've never met Zeminar, so I wouldn't know. But that's who he said he was. And wouldn't it be amusing if she were right, the purple-green dragon said, showing some interest in the proceedings for the first time. I don't see that it matters, the silver-green dragon said. The important thing is that he was a wizard poking around smack in the middle of our mountains. What are we going to do about it? Tell King Tokaz, Roxham said. His job to handle this sort of thing, isn't it? What can Tokaz do about it? Warg said, and there was a faint undercurrent of contempt in his tone. He could use the king's crystal to find out what the wizards are really doing. Wizards are really doing, the thin dragon said in a prim tone. He won't use the crystal for anything less than a full-fledged war, Warg said. And why should he? What could Tokaz do, even if he found out that some wizard was preying on poor defenseless dragons like Garam? Lodge a formal protest with the Society of Wizards, Roxham answered promptly, ignoring Warg's sarcasm. Proper thing to do, no question. Then the next time anyone sees a wizard... His voice trailed off, and he snapped his teeth together suggestively. He'd probably just set up a committee, the purple-green dragon said. Can't anyone think of something else? I don't think we should do anything until we have some idea what Zeminar was after, said the thin dragon. Could be important. We have to do something, the silver-green dragon said. Her claws clashed against the stone table. We can't have wizards wandering in and out whenever they please. Why, we'd lose half our magic in no time. Not to mention everyone sneezing themselves silly every time one of those dratted staffs gets too close, added the dragon at the far end. The dragons began arguing among themselves about what to do, how best to do it. It reminded Simmering of the way her father's ministers argued. Everyone seemed to agree that something ought to be done about the wizards, but they each had a different idea of what was appropriate. Roxham insisted huffily that the only thing to do was to inform the king, who would then make a formal protest. The thin dragon wanted to find out what the wizards were up to. She didn't say how this was to be done, before anyone tried to chase them off. Silver Green Dragon wanted patrols sent out immediately to eat any wizard who ventured into the Mountains of Mourning. The dragon at the far end of the table wanted to attack the headquarters of the Society of Wizards the following morning, and the Green Dragon thought it would be most entertaining to wait and see what the wizards did next. Warg was the only one of the guests who did not have a proposal, though he made occasional comments, usually sarcastic ones, about everyone else's suggestions. Kazul did not say anything at all. Simmering was at first surprised, and then puzzled by her silence, since Kazul was the one who had set the whole discussion going to begin with. As the argument grew, more heated, however, Simmering began to be glad that there was at least one dragon present who was not involved in it. The dragon at the far end of the table was starting to breathe little tongues of fire at the purple-green dragon, and Broxton was threatening loudly to have another allergy attack. But Simmering was fairly sure that Kazul would stop the discussion before things got completely out of hand. She was right. A moment later, while the dragon at the far end was taking a deep breath to continue arguing, the thin dragon was winding up a long, involved train of logical reasons why her proposal was the best, Kazul said, "Thank you all for your advice. I'll certainly think about it before I decide what to do." "What do you mean by that?" the thin dragon asked suspiciously. "It was my dragon who met the wizard," Kazul pointed out. "Therefore, it is my decision whether to report the matter to the king, or take some action on my own, or ask for cooperation from some of you." None of the other dragons appeared to like hearing this, but to Simmering's surprise, none of them gave Kazul any argument about it. The dragon at the far end of the table made a few half-hearted grumbles, but that was all, and the conversation turned to the intricacies of several draconian romances that were currently in progress. As soon as her guests appeared to have calmed down, Kazul gave the signal for the empty moose dishes to be taken away. So Simmering only heard a few incomprehensible snatches of the new conversation. She did not really mind. She had plenty to think about already. And that is the end of Chapter 4.